Waiting information on that. Remember, there was a deadline that was set by the Supreme Court last month. First, for the SBI to furnish all of these details to the Election Commission, and then for the Election Commission to put it out on their website of who had donated how much to whom. All of those details were to be furnished by the SBI. Hari Salve, senior advocate who was appearing for the SBI, had claimed that they wanted more time. They sought an extension until the 30th of June. That petition has now been dismissed by the Supreme Court. Let's cut across to the hearing. Ananya, my colleague, joining us, getting us more details. Ananya, the petition has now been dismissed. There is no extension as far as SBI goes. But by when do they have to now furnish these details to the EC?
Well, definitely it's a big setback that has now come in for the State Bank of India, which had sought an extension till June 30. However, today what has very clearly happened is that the Supreme Court has turned down this particular application by the State Bank of India, and the deadline to submit this data is the close of business hours of March 12th. That is tomorrow. The SBI will have to submit this particular data with regards to these electoral bonds, and very clearly and categorically it is a big and massive setback coming in for the #1 bank in the country from the topmost group of the country, because the Supreme Court believes that the data that it has been seeking can easily and is readily available with the State Bank of India, and that should be given to the ECI until March 12, before the closing of the business hours of March 12. That is almost around 5 p.m. Tomorrow is for the deadline of, in fact, submitting this particular data has been given. The submissions that the data is complex in nature. There were 2 silos that were there, and it would be very complex to, and a tedious exercise to actually collate that particular data. All those submissions have fallen flat. The submission that were made by Mr. Hari Salve have fallen flat to the ground, as the Supreme Court has turned down the application filed by the State Bank of India. Poonam.
So another 24 hours to go before these details have to be furnished by the SBI to the Election Commission. Now, the March 13th was deadline for the Election Commission to put out this information on their website. Does that deadline still stay, Ananya?
Well, the Election Commission of India has been asked to, submit that particular data, upload that particular data on their website as soon as possible, as and when, it would be supplied to the ECI, the data that would be supplied to the ECI by the State Bank of India. The ECI would actually, when I quoted from the order, the Supreme Court also asked the ECI to publish the details of the information supplied to the court as per interim order. The interim order they were passed, there was certain information that the Election Commission of India was asked to disclose with regards to how much of political funding, how much of electoral bonds funding have various political parties received, and that data would have to come up on the Election Commission of India's website very soon. So, big directions coming in this particular case, and very clearly and categorically, the Supreme Court does not seem to part ways with the submission of the State Bank of India, did not accept the demand that was made by the State Bank of India to extend the time to submit this particular data by June 30th. So very clearly and categorically, it's a big and massive setback coming in for the State Bank of India in the electoral bonds case, where the Supreme Court's 5-judge bench headed by the Chief Justice of India, Dr. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud himself, has turned down the application filed by the State Bank of India, very clearly stating that the details that the Supreme Court had sought in its particular order are readily available with the #1 bank in the country, and that should be submitted to the ECI by the end of tomorrow, by the end of working hours of tomorrow, in fact. Right, some scathing observations were also made by the CJI there, going on to ask what exactly the topmost bank of the country was doing for the last 26 days. Why was this delay there in the first place? Was a pointed question the Supreme Court bench had to ask of Hari Salve. Do stay on with us, Ananya. Pallavi also joining us, getting us more details. Pallavi, political ramifications as far as this setback to the SBI goes?
Absolutely, but this is also something which is the opposition party certainly will say we stand vindicated. If you remember, Poonam, ever since this decision was taken about the SBI going back to the Supreme Court asking for more time, the opposition parties had said the entire purpose of this has been defeated, and SBI is actually something which is controlled by the government. It is a public a bank, so why is it that the government is not doing anything about it? And it had accused the BJP and the government of trying to hide the data. At that point of time, Poonam, Finance Ministry sources had told us that, we cannot do much in it, we cannot intervene in this entire matter. The entire verdict by the Supreme Court on the electoral bonds issue in the first place is something which puts many of the corporates in a bit of a spot. It also goes against the banking laws procedure because there's a non-disclosure clause also. But now whatever the SBI has to do, it'll have to do on its own. The government doesn't step into this.
Absolutely. So the political war of words will continue there. Ananya continues to be with us, also getting us more details. Ananya, we're given to understand that the Supreme Court has now gone on to say that if the SBI does not comply with its directions, that is, provide all of these details to the Election Commission by the end of day tomorrow, then the court would have to think about taking action against the bank as well.
Well, definitely the Supreme Court is very, very clear. A stern warning has now been given to the State Bank of India. If at all it does not comply with the directions that were given by the Supreme Court in its order today, they might face a contempt proceeding. They've at this point of time not started a contempt proceeding which were sought by ADR. However, has very, very clearly and categorically stated that if this timeline is not adhered to, if this timeline is violated by the State Bank of India, then contempt notices might also follow. And in fact, contempt proceedings would follow on the #1 bank in the country.
It is the #1 bank of the country. How can you not get your affairs in order was something that the Supreme Court also hinted at. What were you doing for the last 26 days was a question the CGI had to ask of Harish Salve. From 3 months to 3 weeks, different arguments were made as to more time being required, but all of those arguments did fall flat with the Supreme Court setting a deadline of the next 24 hours for the SBI to provide all of these details to the Election Commission, which then would be put on the ECI website before the announcement of election dates. Arunima also joining us on this broadcast. Arunima, as far as the timing of all of this is concerned, that was something of an issue between political parties. The fact that it was coming right before the announcement of election dates is something that the opposition said is something that the BJP didn't want to happen.
Yes, the opposition has got a shot in its arm. Back-to-back 2 incidents that have happened, the opposition is trying to use that to target the Bharatiya Janata Party, to target the government. The first thing, of course, was the setback from the Supreme Court itself as far as the electoral bond issue was concerned. The government said we have nothing to do with it. It's for the State Bank of India to decide, but the opposition did not let go of the opportunity. They kept asking that why is SBI taking so much time? What is the information that they want to hide? Some even pointed out that today when you're talking about, digital transactions everywhere, why is it taking so much time to furnish this data that Supreme Court had asked? Second, of course, the resignation of the election commissioner. So those 2 issues were put together by the opposition to say that this is an attempt by the government to try and influence the elections, and the Supreme Court, as per the opposition, is not really playing ball. So now, with the Supreme Court once again rejecting State Bank of India's, request for more time, even rejecting that request that Harish Salve made, that at least if you don't want to give us that much time, give us 2 to 3 weeks, some part of the order we can then implement. Even that falling flat, the opposition is bound to sharpen its attack. Keep an eye on the social media platforms. Expect all political leaders from the opposition spectrum to come out and go all guns blazing against the government.
Right, Arunima, do stay on with us. Aman joins us on this broadcast as well, but cutting across to some reactions coming in from the Supreme Court first.
Has dismissed the application of the State Bank, pointing out that the data that the court had asked them to give is already available with the State Bank. According to their own affidavit, they have to just submit the details of the donors on the one hand and the details of the parties which redeemed the bonds on the other hand. State Bank was saying we have to do the cross-matching, etc. Court has said you don't need to do the cross-matching, just give these details to the Election Commission and you have to give it by tomorrow. And thereafter they have said that the State Bank chairman should file an affidavit to this effect. They are not yet taking any contempt action, but they may have to if the State Bank doesn't comply. They have also said that the Election Commission should publish all these details which have been given by the State Bank about the donors and the parties which have received the bonds by 15th of this month. And also the earlier details which were supposed to be given by political parties to the Election Commission about the bonds received by them, even those details have to be published by 15th of this month. So it's a very good, strong judgment in consonance with the earlier strong judgment that the court had given on electoral bonds.